Paul Leenderste is the founder of the Root Cause Institute. He's also the author of the book, The Root Cause of Cancer. And he has really incredible experience and information specifically about healing cancer. What is cancer and what is the root cause? Obviously, he's got a lot to say about that, but his experience is with people with cancer, stage 3 and stage 4 cancer, because they're clients for him. He coaches people. Most of what he's doing now is training other practitioners and coaches in the work that he does. Really, really incredible. So I read Paul's book, but I also attended a couple of free talks that Paul was giving, and I just really liked him. I like his style. I like his book, but I really enjoy listening to him. I love the way he interacts with people who are asking questions, or if some of his clients give some of their testimonials at the talks. It's just really refreshing to hear his perspective and the way he interacts with people. So I was delighted to have him on the show. I thought it was a really incredible chat. I knew it would be. I knew that I would really like talking to Paul. What I didn't expect is for it to hit home. I didn't really, I guess I was just really looking forward to talking to him. And I didn't think about how that it might possibly remind me of how much work I have to do, my own spiritual growth. I've been on my own spiritual growth path for at least a decade now, I would say. And it's a journey, right? Our own healing journey, our own spiritual growth. It's a journey. I got off the call with him, the recording, and just had this moment of, wow, I've done a lot of really cool things. I've done a lot of healing. I'm very grateful, and I'm also just aware of how much more there is to do and how we get in these habits and we have a mindset and limiting beliefs that just swirl around like we're the places where we're still on autopilot or something that was really helpful or healing at some point, but we just sort of got out of the habit of doing it or forgot or whatever happened. So I was just reminded of a lot of things that I want to continue to work on while I was talking to Paul. And if that happens for you, hey, we're in the same boat. But I hope you enjoy this chat with Paul because it was really inspiring. Yeah. So I tune in and let me know what your thoughts are at the end. If you want to leave some comments, we love that. So, Paul, I'm going to say your last name. I'm going to try Leendert. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's perfect.
Leendert?
Yeah.
No, I can't be
Hmm.
perfect. All right. I'm so
Yeah, it's right
excited.
on.
So excited to have you on the show. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so much to talk about. So, I have read your book, The Root Cause of Cancer,
Awesome.
obviously. But I also have heard you speak a couple of times. You've had some talks, and I'm not even sure. I think a friend of mine told me about you, and I popped in, sort of not even knowing what the talk was going to be about. It was really great. And what I like about, well, I like your information, I like the book. But what I like about you is you embody respect and kindness in a really special way. And I think it's because of the work that you have done, but it seems like that's a really smart, like it's just a perfect match, the work that you do, because you seem very respectful and kind, not only to the people who are coming to learn from you, but the people who are coming who are desperate for help and healing. Like I can feel how much they get from you. So that's the main thing that I like about listening to you speak.
I really appreciate that observation. Thanks for acknowledging that. That
Yeah.
has been
Yeah.
a lot of work on my part over the years. I've learned the hard way too, especially in the beginning when I started many years ago working with people with cancer. Because the root cause of cancer, well, first of all, because cancer is a sensitive topic,
Right.
many people have been impacted by cancer in
Mhm.
emotionally painful ways. There's a lot of strong belief systems about cancer in all different ways, and
Mhm.
And then in addition to that, as I teach, the root cause of cancer related is caused by psycho-emotional stress that has become repressed and stuck in our body. Then it makes it extra sensitive because, I mean, stress, first of all, is not something that feels good.
Right,
So when you start to talk about stress and the causes of cancer, we're talking about negative types of things.
right.
And yeah, so I've really tried hard to learn over the years how to connect with people on this topic and make my message receivable. Thanks for noticing
Noticing
that I've
that, yeah,
been
and
working on that.
really feeling that,
Yeah.
because I also like that I like that you're no nonsense about it too, so you're very kind and respectful, and I like your ways, especially when people that have worked with you speak, and the way you I can just see the way you interact with them, but I also like that you're no nonsense because when people we're talking stage 3, stage 4 cancer, people that are coming to you for help and also practitioners, but there's no time to dilly-dally and to tiptoe around what's really causing what's causing the problems because they've already tried my sense is, from hearing a few of the people that have worked with you, my sense is they've tried a lot of stuff, right?
Mhm.
And they know that stress is bad. My specialty is stress, anxiety, and mood, right? So I too, I understand when you start talking about stress and anxiety, and often I run against people who are like, "Oh, I'm not anxious." And they're some of the most anxious people I've ever met. I'm like, "Okay,
Mhm. Mhm.
all right," and you don't immediately go, "Yes, you are." But you have to work with that, right? But
Uh-huh.
also there's an urgency when people are coming to you because you can't I was gonna I don't know how else to put it. You can't mess around with getting to
Mhm.
work with people.
It's pretty serious, right? Like, cancer is one of the scariest things you can experience as a
Yeah,
human being,
right.
because it's connecting us to the potential of death.
Mhm.
Death is the one of the scariest things.
Yeah, for
Like, it's
most
pretty
people, yes.
serious.
Right.
Yeah. One of the beautiful things about cancer, if I can say that, to
I
try to look at the positive,
yes.
is that cancer has the potential, it still doesn't guarantee it, but it has the potential to really break down our ego complex
Mhm.
that we have acquired mainly from our childhood,
Yes.
our upbringing, and our environment in our earliest years, which has shaped a lot of our beliefs and has led to who we are today. But
Right.
our beliefs and our ego complex that we acquired is not really the essence of who we are. It can change. Like we can learn in childhood that the boogeyman exists. We can learn that the tooth fairy exists and Santa Claus and far more serious types of things we can learn about,
Mhm.
what love is and how to approach how to deal with our emotions, for
Mhm.
example. We learn all these things.
Or not
And
deal, right? Mhm.
yeah, whenever that's in error, because that can certainly be in error, and for
Yeah.
sure, if we develop cancer, it means some of these things are in error. So we need to be able to surrender our ego. We've got to be able to start practicing introspection. We've got to become one of the things I teach in my training is essential quality for healing is humility. We
Mhm.
have to start practicing humility. And if you start really looking into things, you can identify that one or both of your parents didn't practice humility. They were arrogant, at least at times, or even you could have a parent that was narcissistic.
Mhm.
So when you start this process of doing the root cause work,
Yes,
as I call it,
right?
you've got to start looking at your ego complex and go like, what is going on in my life and why? How did I get here? You
Right.
gotta have humility to do that. And it's not personal, it's spiritual. It's a big responsibility.
Mm,
So that's the gift that cancer can create. It can motivate us to, especially if we've tried the juicing and the apricot kernels and chemotherapy and all these things to try to destroy cancer. None of those things address the root cause. So they don't work typically long term.
mhm,
Sometimes they can have benefit, of course. They can certainly have benefit, potentially. Not that's still not even a guarantee. It can
mhm,
also do damage, but yeah, they're not the root cause. So when a person's tried all of those things and then it seems like there's no other option, that's when the most important work can be delved into, the root cause work, which for sure is life changing in a positive way.
Right.
The only way you can really heal yourself
Mhm.
is if you go through a positive spiritual growth process involved
Mhm.
in what we're talking about, shedding our ego, understanding our ego complex, how it was formed, and basically redefining ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. The people that work with you are the willingness to reconstruct everything in their lives. Like look at, and it doesn't mean everything necessarily changes, but a lot of it.
Yeah,
The
it's a
willingness.
high calling. It's a high calling. I
Yeah.
call it an initiation. It's a
Yeah.
spiritual initiation.
Yeah,
You
that's a
know, it's
perfect.
not a light thing. It's not a light endeavor.
That's true. So I want to back up just a little bit because you got started. I know you had a couple people close to you that died from cancer, and you just
Hmm.
started putting this together, but you started inviting people into your home and working with people. This is how you got started, which is fascinating to me. Just in case people don't really know you or haven't heard about you, let's just back up a little bit as to how you got started. And then at what point were you like, okay, this is psycho emotional. Like this,
Mm.
we're really working because I know you also talk about, of course, the food is important, our lifestyle, all of these things, but the psycho emotional part, when did you go, okay, this is what we need to be doing here?
Okay, well, it's been many years now, but I
Yeah.
think I can recall probably one of the most important things that made me go, "Whoa, this
Okay.
is purely psycho-emotional."
Okay.
Because as you said, when I had people come live with me with cancer,
Yes.
I did that for a 10-year period.
Right. And these
And
are all they stage 3, stage 4,
they were
right?
mostly stage 4, yeah,
That's
and
at
then
that
stage
time.
3. Mhm.
Okay. Got it.
So that, as you said in the beginning, it was all individuals who had tried everything they could to heal, both alternative and traditional, and
Yes.
then been told nothing could be done. So that's why they were willing to do this root cause work,
Mhm.
which turns out to be the work that is necessary to heal.
Got it.
And how I came to, so first of all, the reason I started doing this root cause work and became just devoted to identifying the root cause and really coming to understand it is because of family members dying of cancer. We
Mhm.
tried everything, it didn't work, they died. Then that led to my theory, which is that stress must somehow be the cause.
Mhm.
And and then that eventually led a couple years later into this 10-year period of having people with cancer live with me. So when I had clients living with me,
Yeah.
I was addressing all kinds of physical things. I was wanting to optimize, and of course, so were they, everything I could lifestyle wise. And we did that. We had the the water that we were just drinking water, no other liquids, and it was spring water, like it was pure and
Mhm.
clean. We were eating only organic food.
Mhm.
We were in super clean air. I was in the middle of a forest.
Mhm.
We were um, doing many things: meditation, tai chi, body work, and on and on. High quality supplements, everything you could imagine. I
Yeah.
was well versed in that kind of stuff. But I didn't see any significant results with any of my clients, despite doing all those things.
Mhm.
When I would see results is when a client would have an emotional release.
Mhm.
So it became very clear to me, like I would have clients because it was stage 4, it also helped show because everything was so intensified. Then when we did something that was truly effective,
Mhm.
it would reveal itself very easily because
Mhm.
of the severity of symptoms.
Mhm.
So, for example, a person would be in so much pain because a tumor was uh, putting pressure on, say, a nerve, and their pain might be 10 out of 10, like where they cry from the pain. So then we would do a coaching session where we'd sit down and talk for 2 hours about an event that has occurred in their life or some reality that is in their life now still. Um, and then basically by processing this together psycho emotionally, and coming to this point of realizations and answers and truth, as I call it, connecting to truth, then we reach this sort of breakthrough point in that session where they have an emotional release or a really deep realization in their heart. So
Mm.
there's this huge shift psycho-emotionally. And
Mhm.
after that release, they'd wake up the next morning and their pain has diminished to like a 3.
Mm.
Or I've had clients where their pain diminishes within, I mean, immediately their
Mhm.
pain diminishes. So then I started to realize from many examples like the one I just shared that the psycho-emotional is the cause, and that is where the healing occurs. And all the lifestyle stuff is merely supportive, and it's important
Mhm.
because I mean, if you eat fast food and you get exposed to all kinds of toxins, and if your body is full of toxins and you have parasites and things like that, that will affect your emotions, of course. It's
Mhm.
not the root cause of the emotions, but it will influence in a negative way. It'll have a negative impact on your emotions. And then it makes it harder to, you know, do healing work
Do
in
the
that
work,
realm
yeah.
of emotions, right? So,
Right, exactly.
so, but as I said, once you clear all the toxins out and you have your lifestyle optimized, tumor won't budge. I've seen it over and over again.
Mhm.
And even today, when I have clients come to me, now I just work online with clients because my main focus is teaching now,
Right,
my level 1 and
practitioners.
2 training, but
Mhm.
I'm still working with people online, and I have I'm accumulating testimonials of people reversing their cancer just by coaching online now without even having my residency.
Right,
Um,
right.
but but yeah, the um, I forget what I was just gonna say.
Well,
I kind of
that's okay. I love it because
I
I
think I
mean,
made my point.
you did. I love it because it's exactly what I've seen. And what's interesting is I started in the I mean, my background's in clinical mental health, but I was seeing that we were missing like gut healing and the nutrition and all of that piece needed to be in place as well. But what I've seen is when everything's in place, it makes the work smoother. It makes it easier, not easy because it's not easy, but to go deeper into the healing so that they go together. But I'm just excited that I'm back at my roots in the psycho emotional. I would call it psychosocial, emotional, and spiritual, which I think
Oh, I love
you
that.
would too. Like
I
that's
totally
what we're
understand why you say that. Yeah.
that's the
Mhm.
work that we're really doing. And so I just think it's interesting that that's where you came to. Like, so people were living with you for like 3 weeks about. Is that generally
Mhm.
they would
Yep.
come and
At
mhm.
one time, it was 4 weeks, actually. Then I reduced it to 3 because I found that 3 weeks was all that was necessary. I
Okay.
even had one client, or maybe it was 2, but for sure I had one client leave after 2 weeks because all of their symptoms had disappeared, and they felt like they figured it all out, and they didn't need to stay any longer, and she remained healed after she left too.
That's what's amazing. So when can we talk a little bit about truth? Can we circle back to what you were talking about of like revealing the truth in the is there anything more that
Mm,
you can say about
sure.
what does that look
Yeah.
like? Because I'm sure people are like,
This
okay, what truth?
what does that mean?
What does that
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, I love making things practical and not
Mm.
just philosophical.
Right.
Um, and that can be a sensitive topic too. What is the truth, right? Because
Mhm.
some of the damage that many of us have received, especially in our childhood, is having our boundaries crossed in such a way, whether it's physical or emotional or sexual,
Mhm.
um, where our truth
Mhm.
is just overrided. Our truth, like what we want, what we desire. Let's say based on our freedom, we want to go play. Well, we're not allowed. Or um, a common experience that I've seen in my coaching practice is that many times people are punished as a child when they didn't actually do anything wrong.
Mhm.
So their parent thought they did, but they honestly did not. They tell me in the session, Paul, I didn't even do anything wrong when I was this little 6-year-old. They
Mhm.
thought I did, but I didn't, and I was punished. So we can have a lot of potentially even trauma, but at least stress and emotional wounds related to our truth, right? So when I start talking about, one of the things I say is only the truth heals.
Mm,
Is like, and we have to follow the path of truth. But then it's like, well, people can get defensive. Well, yeah, but my truth's different from your truth.
right.
So I want to explain this. It's important.
Yeah. Yes.
um, it's kind of both. It's like, yes, everyone has their own truth,
Mhm.
and that needs to be acknowledged and respected. But then there's also a truth that applies to us all. And that's the truth. So both these things have to be considered in order for healing or spiritual evolution to take place.
Mhm.
So, for example, the truth, let's say capital T,
Yes,
not
that's
personal
what
truth,
I
but
yep.
the
Capital
truth.
T truth,
he-
uh-huh.
here's an example. We all have a soul, and with our soul comes our own unique desires and passions and even direction in life. So, for example, I could be working in a factory and I took that factory job because I needed money. And maybe I'm grateful for that at first. But let's say after a year, I start to feel like I'm not happy. This is just about money. I feel empty. It's not nourishing my soul. So here's where a truth comes into play, the truth, which would apply to us all. If we are moving off path, or to say in a different way, if we start to go against our soul,
Oh, mhm.
there will be consequences to that because we're here to live a soul life. And that's the truth. That's the truth. And any of us, in any different, unique kind of situation, if you start to go against your very soul, which is your desires and the things that make you happy, if you go against those things, then you will actually begin to develop symptoms in your body.
Yes.
And that's the truth. So the truth applies to us all.
Mhm.
Whereas my truth might be like, oh, I love working in the factory. And then another person that's working in the factory right beside me, same factory, their truth in that moment is, I don't like working in this factory.
Misery, right.
Right? Yeah. So you see the difference between our personal truth and then the truth. The truth is like it's more like a spiritual law that we're all governed by.
Yes, 100% agree. I really come to this place too that well, it really happened. So I had 2 really important people in my life that died from cancer. My father died from pancreatic cancer, and at that time, it led me to more I got really interested in gut healing and more of the physical health stuff, right? And then my
Mhm.
best friend died from brain cancer. And when Ange, her name was Angela, when Ange died, it was more like for me, I was like, I don't want to waste a second in an inauthentic life. I don't want to, I kept saying, like, I don't want to waste a second barking up some wrong tree. And for me, that meant like work and the way I was living my life. And I'm just wondering for you, like, so the truth, big T truth, I believe that we are here to our soul has a journey. And that those desires, what we like, what we're drawn to, that's not bad. That's actually, that's not like a sin or so. It's the way that we are, that's to push us in the right directions or the right
Mhm.
direction for our path. So that makes perfect sense to me. And I was just thinking about how has this impacted you? You worked with all of these people. Did you, change your life based on like working with people and watching people go through this process? Has it shifted things for you in your soul journey?
Absolutely. Because if you have a relationship with someone.
Yes,
So I'm not talking about coaching someone, but let's say you're in an intimate relationship with somebody,
sure.
or a family relationship, which is
Sure.
like a more significant, entangled kind of a relationship. It's not
Mhm.
surface, right? It's like your brother or your sister or your mom or your life partner. Those relationships very quickly start to cause us to have challenges usually because
Right.
because because they start to dig up or cause our shadow or our subconscious to come to the surface. And, so like the people that we love the most are typically the people we have the most significant challenges with.
Sure.
If you just run into a friend on the street, an acquaintance, everyone typically just says, "How you doing?" "Great." And it's like not even necessarily true that you're doing great. But in a close relationship, all the deep stuff starts to come up to the surface.
Mhm.
So that's one of the main areas where we have the opportunity to grow spiritually, to
Mhm.
begin identifying the parts of ourselves that are in error with regards to whether or not they're in alignment with truth and love.
Mhm.
So when you're doing root cause work,
Mhm.
if you're a coach on that level, then what it means is you're going deep with pretty much every client you have. You're going deep together. You're forming a team and you're, digging into the ego. And I have an ego too. you know, so
No,
so
not
so
you.
so when we're digging into that,
Yeah.
as people share with me and I'm observing and I'm working through this stuff, it really teaches me so much and it reveals so much to me.
Mhm.
And sometimes I realize I have that exact thing, or at least a similar
Similar,
thing
right.
that I need to work on still myself. So,
Mhm.
like, I'll just give an example.
Yeah.
If I'm working with a client and it's become very clear that, let's say, they're afraid to stand up to authority, even
Mhm.
if the authority's treating them poorly,
Mhm.
well, then if that's true for me in my life, it will be reflected to me very clearly. Like when we're having the discussion, this little birdie in the back of my mind will be saying, "Hey, Paul, you don't stand up to authority either." So this root cause work has exposed me to this, like to a lot more spiritual responsibility to better myself and evolve my own soul.
Mhm.
And sometimes that feels, well, usually I love that. Like I'm passionate about this work. Sometimes it can feel like a burden, like overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like I have to remember, oh, just go be a kid.
Mhm.
Set the spiritual stuff aside and go play, you know?
Right.
And sometimes it comes with a heavy responsibility too, when you're helping someone with cancer or
Mhm.
any kind of serious health challenge, there
Mhm.
is the possibility that the person could die,
Yep.
especially when it's stage 3, stage 4. And in the medical system, I don't think there's as much of a personal, um, what should I like, how did I say this? Like, there isn't as much of personal accountability or responsibility. Like, if a person goes to the hospital, all of the hope is placed on a treatment, right? And the treatment isn't even something that the oncologists or the nurses even created. Someone else created the treatment, like a pharmaceutical company.
Mhm.
So, and they're just administering the treatment. So they got to make sure they administer it properly. That's their responsibility. And then the patient is just following the rules and trying to do that as best they can. Now, if the treatment doesn't work and they die, it's kind of like it's obviously tragic, but there's no responsibility in any kind of direct way on anybody.
Mhm.
It's like it's just all on that treatment. If the treatment doesn't work, it's kind of just acceptable. But when you're a coach and you're digging into this stuff, and if you as an individual, as a someone that has a disease, decides to take responsibility for healing yourself, it's very different because then you get really deeply involved. And now it's like we got to figure this out together and got to go through changes. You need to evolve. So there is this huge responsibility, and now, of course, all we can do is the best we can.
Right.
We're just going to do the best we can, but
Mhm.
it's definitely a much more serious kind of responsibility to take.
Right.
So this work has really challenged me in so many ways, and I've done my best to grow through those challenges,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I continue to.
Yes, I can see that, and I know yeah. I was also just kinda I wanna talk a little bit more about responsibility and kind of what it might look like some real examples of when people heal and change their lives and take full responsibility for their own healing. I wanted to hear some stories about, or whatever you have, of what that looks like. Like the woman that came for 2 weeks felt like she had this understanding, but does she just go back to her life? What like I
Ah,
imagine like everything uproots and
mhm,
yeah, like everything is possibly shifted. So,
mhm.
I wondered
Oh,
if you have
yeah.
some stories you wanna share about that, like what it looks like when we take full responsibility for it's just responsibility in general, if you have thoughts about that, and then any stories you wanna share of
Uh-huh.
what that looks like.
Um, well, I won't use her as an example because I always have to try to do my best to,
Give
um,
yes,
maintain
anonymity. Mhm.
privacy. Yeah.
Yes.
Here's an example where one of my clients wanted was going to church with their family,
Mhm,
and the parent of the spouse, like of their partner,
mhm.
was the minister of this church.
Aha.
Now I forget what religion it was, so that might not be the right term, minister or priest or anyways,
Mhm.
the leader, the
Right.
teacher.
Right.
And they did not want to go there. They weren't happy there, but they're carrying this fear inside for years, uh, because they didn't want to disappoint anyone. They wanted to keep the peace, and they just knew that if they were to leave, if they didn't go to that church, because they wanted to go to this other church, and they were
Mhm,
really excited about going to this other church, but they just always kept sacrificing that desire. And when we started to do the root cause work, this is one of the things came up among multiple things. And then they just realized, I need to follow my truth. I need to be authentic to myself here. And this personal sacrifice is not love. And so when they communicated this to the minister, to the father, that father cut them out of their life. He was so upset, so offended that the love,
mhm.
which turns out to be conditional,
Right.
right, was removed.
Right.
And so they had to go through this transition of loving themselves,
Mhm.
of realizing, you know what, I've got to love myself because if I sacrifice myself for this conditional love, it's not really love of myself. Now, the father or the minister, they're happy, but not me. And so they followed their heart and they went to this new congregation, and they're so happy there. Like it's where they wanted to go for so long, and they've got all the reasons for that, and they're really happy. And now they're continuing to practice spirituality, and they're keeping an open heart and an open door to this father-in-law reconnecting and establishing a new, like, higher love-based relationship that's based on understanding, that's based on freedom and respect of desires. And
Mhm.
maybe God is the one who thought that the person should go to this other place because there's unique experiences and things that they need on their soul journey.
Exactly.
So many
Mhm.
many times in the healing work we've got to go through some changes that can
Mhm.
be, you know
Uncomfortable?
scary,
Scary?
uncomfortable,
Yeah.
yeah, and we
Yeah.
really are growing. We are
Yeah.
truly growing when we do that,
Yeah.
and growth is not so easy. Yeah, it's
No,
like,
but it's the difference between the uncomfortableness that you feel by doing something that's scary or living in constant fear inauthentically, like, by not being your authentic self, like, the difference I can see that both would be scary. But you're
Mhm,
going to kill yourself. You are going to develop symptoms. You're going you're going to develop inflammation, which is going to become some kind of disease if you're constantly shoving things down, not allowing yourself, your heart to be free to be yourself.
mhm,
So I can see that both people could could see that both are kind of a scary, fearful place, but one's in service to your soul. So,
Right.
y
And you know what's interesting is you mentioned something in the beginning, like this is not a sin.
right,
Um, you know, when our soul calls to us, it's usually not calling us to go commit a sinful act.
right.
Typically, our freedom-based desires are about life. They're legitimate, respectable, like understandable desires. But the thing that usually traps us or gets us stuck is some kind of an attachment.
Mm,
And
right,
these attachments are hard to break. They can be hard to break.
right. Yeah. Over attachments too. Like I'm thinking about the things that we just but it's not out, it's out of fear, it's not out of love, right?
Right.
And I
Yeah.
think that's where you
So
start to go, okay.
we're actually already, if we use the word sin, because it's a powerful word, it portrays a lot of meaning, whether you're religious or not.
Mhm,
Typically, people understand. How I define sin is, well, there's many. We could have a big discussion about it, but like here, I would just simply say that sin is when you go against yourself
mhm.
or the truth and love.
Yes.
So if you're sacrifice like in this example where the person's going to the church that they don't want to go to and they're just going out of obligation, and as time goes on they're just more and more unhappy, and their soul is calling them to this other experience but they're not going. Now we're actually moving into the territory of sin. That is the sin,
Mhm.
right? So a sin creates unhappiness and creates, like as you said, disease. A sin can create disease. Sometimes we can have symptoms because we are actually sinning.
Right.
One of my clients, so I don't know, somehow we're getting into a lot of religious talk here,
Yeah, I
but
didn't you never know. Yeah, it's good. It's
it's an
all good.
important area to discuss. We could talk about the school system, we could talk about relationships, we can talk about religion.
Yeah,
Um, anyways, this other example is coming to my mind
sure.
where one of my clients, um, one of their experiences in childhood was whenever they would go to church with their mother, they would always be so afraid during church because their mother was really punishing, and she was oftentimes punishing for no reason, and they never understood really why.
Mhm.
And after church, they'd get up and leave, and this was like a regular pattern. She would grab my client by the shoulder, like pinch the shoulder, like
Right.
if you dig into the shoulder, there's a spot that
Mhm.
parents, especially like baby boomer generation, were taught this is what you do to kids. You grab them by the shoulder and you dig in, and it can hurt a lot. And she would do this regularly after church when they're walking out. She'd be like, now you come here. And I'd grab them and drag my client out of church. And they said to me, they never really understood why. So they would go to church and they would sit there and try to behave and try to make sure they don't break any rules. After church, they'd be dragged out like that. And so what's ironic here is that that's actually abuse. And in our society, there's a lot of examples. We could have a big talk about justified abuse, where somehow humanity thinks that it's loving to do abusive acts to our children, for
Right.
example. So
Right.
her as a mother, she's thinking, I got to punish this child in this way. But what she doesn't realize is that she's committing an act of sin right in the church. That's not how you have it. Like, God is love, not physical violence,
Right.
right? So there's a lot of confusion in humanity once we get deep into the spiritual stuff and the religious stuff and beliefs. There's a lot of confusion, and basically sometimes things are just flipped completely upside down.
Right.
Like like this is love, and it's actually as far from love as you could imagine.
Mhm.
And how we know that something is love versus not love is love doesn't create pain, you
Right.
know?
Right. It
Like,
doesn't make you feel scared and afraid and cause pain.
right.
Right.
So
I know, that's the
but until we become conscious, we can just be on autopilot too. Like generationally, if you're grabbed by on the shoulder by your parents and you don't come to a conscious place or state of being in your life where you're doing this kind of deeper work on yourself, you can definitely just automatically do that to your own kids. Just do the same thing to them.
Right, or
without
the
even really
opposite.
thinking about it.
Yeah, or
Or
you
yeah, the opposite where you
like,
never
never
ever confront your children and
right, like, it can have
you're
all these
not strict and you give so much freedom that they just get away with everything and they're never taught boundaries and they're never taught rules at all.
right,
Because you're so punished so badly, you just never want to do that to your kids. So you just go to the opposite polarity. Yeah.
right. So, it's just making me think that, I mean, if you're working with people, and I know you're doing it online now, but I was just thinking that you got to a place where 3 weeks, it's amazing what you can do in a short time because you're talking about childhood stuff, adult now stuff, like the whole kind of, you're doing a whole lifespan review
Mhm.
and really doing that deep work. Do you find there are just these really significant things that stick out for people? Because I'm thinking the brain, neurons that fire together wire together. So if you pick out some of these pretty significant stressors that have come up in people's lives, you can unravel a whole lot of stuff rather quickly. But I'm just thinking, I know a lot of people like, oh God, do I really have to go into the childhood stuff? Do I have? Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
That's where our liberation is,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. One of the things that I teach in my training is that our childhood is our first birth and there is potential to have a second birth.
Sure.
And I just kind of realized that just with myself too, through my
Mhm.
own evolutionary process. There was a time where I realized that I was operating from beliefs that I just acquired in childhood and I never even questioned things. I
Right.
just didn't even question it, So when you start to awaken to that, that's the beginning of the second birth. And
Mhm.
the second birth is when we consciously start to decide what our dreams are and how we're going to approach love and so on, and we start to like redefine ourselves and reconstruct ourselves. The first birth is just passive. We don't even have free will. As a child, our will is very low. We don't have a lot of free will. If your parents decide that you're gonna go to school, how many children, like how strong of free will do we have? If
Mhm.
you're if you're 20 and your parents try to tell you you have to go to school, even if you don't want to, then you've got some free will now. So you could say, no thanks. And you're
Right.
not gonna actually be able to control me. No way.
Right.
Right?
Right. I actually have one of those at home now. So yeah. Uh, yeah. I'm not trying to tell him what to do. We're just trying to be as loving and supportive as possible. But I can tell you as a parent, it's so hard to say, find yourself. Yeah, it's all about following your soul's desires. And yet as a parent, I'm like, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, and this is what I mean if you've heard me on other interviews, I've talked about how we're not prepared for life. We're
Right.
not we're not given the tools and the instructions to navigate life. When we go to school, we're not taught that. These
Mhm.
are the things I teach in my training.
Right.
And they're essential because if we don't have those tools, we can literally just die because life is a pretty serious challenge.
Hmm.
And so, for example, there's a whole set of tools really that mothers and fathers uh, should kind of be equipped with, right, before we have kids. Wouldn't that make sense? Like,
Hmm.
where is this knowledge? Who has it? It's just taken for granted. Like, there are some things that are instinctually uh, that happen automatically. Like, you
Hmm.
can just give birth and you don't need any instruction. You can breastfeed and you don't need anyone to teach you that. It's instinctual. But then with the more complex types of things, psycho-emotional and spiritual,
Hmm.
how does a mother stop worrying about their child? Or how does a mother accept the inherent risks that go with giving their child freedom?
Hmm.
How do you deal with how do you know if you're being too controlling versus the opposite,
Right. Yeah.
being neglectful? How do we navigate all this? And this stuff can be intense. Like this can reach I've done sessions with clients where those types of conflicts that can occur, big
Mhm.
conflicts can occur, has reached the point where police are called,
Oh, right.
you know, or reached a point where the teenager just runs away, or it's
Mhm.
like pretty heavy stuff. And my point is to point that out, first of all, because that can cause a lot of stress, right? And these are things that can lead to cancer, truly.
I know.
And yeah, and we're not prepared for it. There's not really any kind of training. And this is
No.
essential stuff. It's like
Mhm.
we need elders or wise people to somehow bring this into society, and it needs to be a priority, really. Instead, society's kind of more like naive. Like most of my friends, the truth is that who have children, they say to me in truth, Paul, don't have kids. They're like, oh God, man, like if I could go back, I would not have my kids. And they all say, like I
We
love
love
my
them.
kids. I
Right.
love my kids, and they're just making a point, like maybe some of them are really honest here, and
Mhm.
others they're just venting. But a
Mhm.
lot of society is kind of taught that becoming a parent's just this game,
Yeah,
almost like
just this
this
thing
is
you do, right?
yeah, this is just this thing you do. Like it'll just be a breeze. Like I can't wait to be a parent.
Mm-mm.
Cool. Or like, life kind of is meaningless and I don't really know what to do, so let's just have a kid.
Yeah, not a good time to have it.
No, it's like
Yeah,
having a child is one of the biggest sacred contracts you could ever form.
that's right.
It's one of the most intense spiritual responsibilities you can ever have as a human being.
Yeah.
That's a major, major deal.
Mhm.
And society, school, upbringing, that we're not taught how to like
No, and even if
no
we are,
tools.
what's funny, Paul, is when I started my career, I was really into parenting. I wrote a book. My company was called Effective Parenting. I wrote this book, and then I had these 2 little kids that have that are now 21 and 18, right? But have really kicked my ass. And there's nothing like a kid, not literally, right? But like there's nothing like a child that contract, that spiritual emotional contract to really break your heart wide open and to help you like
Mm,
strip your ego, strip
mm,
whatever beliefs you have about things. So it's interesting that I wasn't expecting to talk about this, but it is true that my worry and concern for my own children has probably been the most stress I've ever experienced. And I've been through a lot of stressful experiences, but this would be yeah, and I think that's too why I'm so passionate about telling people. It's the psycho-emotional work that we have to do. It's the beliefs, it's the responsibility that we have for our own spiritual growth. Like this, if
mhm.
we don't do that, I don't know where we're headed if we don't do that as a society,
Oh,
as
I can tell you where we're headed.
okay, tell me where we're headed, Paul.
If we don't do that, just statistically, fact-wise,
Yeah,
the rate of cancer today is 1 in 2 people.
right. Like we're
So
up,
that's where we're headed, right? The incidence of cancer is rising.
right.
And what's also interesting, a lot of people probably haven't thought about this, but I of course have because of the work that I'm always involved in, is that the rate of childhood cancer
Yeah.
is rising more than any other cancer. It's rising significantly. At least it's rising significantly. I maybe I don't know the statistics as of today, but
Mhm.
years ago when I looked into it, it was the fastest growing cancer. And children are dying of
Right.
cancer, major tragedy. But what this is really sort of revealing is that the path that humanity is on
Mhm.
as a whole
Mhm.
is leading to the end of family lineages.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, if our children are dying of cancer, that means they can't actually perpetuate our family lineage, right? Like they can't have children of their own.
Right.
So generationally, where we're headed with cancer, like it's reaching 1 in 2 people, children are dying of cancer, is if we don't actually start doing the real healing work, which is truly spiritual and difficult, but if we don't do, but it's so important and meaningful, we don't start doing the root cause work and stop focusing on all the apricot kernels and like a chemotherapy has been focused on for 100 years. We're
Right.
just focusing on all these sort of remedies and treatments, but the deeper stuff is what we've been talking about. And it
Mhm.
has to do with how to relate and how to be happy in life and how to deal with stresses. And that's where there's the potential to really change the life experiences of people, where we can
Right.
start if we focus there, not
Mhm.
only will we start to eliminate cancer and many other diseases which are emotional, psycho-emotional based,
Right.
but we'll actually start to make the world a better place on a feeling level.
Agreed.
Like, how do we define a good world? Is it one with flashy cars and big houses, or is it one where people are really feeling free and living a purposeful life, and they're inspired about their life, and they're looking forward to life, and they're happy, and of course therefore they're healthy? That's like how we create a beautiful world. But that's not what's happening. The fact is, one
Mhm.
in two people are developing cancer, and it's because of this, what we're talking about. This root cause work is so important.
Right.
In my opinion, it's got to be one of the most important things that humanity should focus on.
I agree. Well, of course I do, because I'm seeing the rate of anxiety in kids, stress, anxiety, mood issues in younger and younger children. These numbers are going higher and higher and higher. So,
Mhm.
I think, and I just read an article yesterday. I didn't read the article. I read the title of the article of like, no one knows why. And I'm like, I know why. We can tell you why. Right? We can tell
Mhm,
you what's going on. We are so far removed from the fact that we are nature. We are part of nature. We're so far removed at this point that
mm,
we've gotta get back to, and I think that the psycho-emotional part is is the most important piece of the whole picture.
mm,
So yeah, it's just, yeah, I think sometimes people get really, myself included, a little overwhelmed because it's like, okay, well, where do I start? And with people that come to you, where do you start? Like, do you just do you just say you just start somewhere and see where it goes?
well, I always start with a root cause session,
Okay.
and because basically I've become very good at tracking back to the root cause, and
Mhm.
in one session, I can usually get to the root cause with the person.
Yeah.
So that's where we start. And
Okay.
then that root cause, which is something that's happening in adult life, then will be correlated with something that happened in childhood.
Uh-huh.
And then, from there it starts to branch out, and then we can start like collecting pieces of the puzzle and then figuring out what steps to take next, because every
Right.
situation's totally unique,
Totally
so
different.
it's
Mhm.
always has to be customized.
Right. So, Paul,
Mhm.
do you think that you were like born to do this work? Like, because you are good at, it's almost like hound dogging the root cause of like,
It's an
and I know,
interesting question. Like, like
like, yeah, as a kid,
destiny
did
and
you see this coming, or can you see how that's a real skill for you to be able
mm.
to just kind of move through
Thank
and
you.
find the thing? Yeah.
Well, I've thought about this at times, and I'm not sure if I was born to do this. We can get into a lot of different philosophies around that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like love that topic though, for sure. But what I would say is, uh, first of all, I was born on a farm.
Um,
And when you're born on a farm
mhm,
and you're growing your own food
mhm,
and you're interacting with animals and you're more like self-sufficient,
mhm.
then what it does is it influences you in such a way where you need to take responsibility for yourself. And when you take responsibility for yourself, you have to think. Like, you have to use our hu- thinking faculty.
Mhm.
But if you're born, you if so so a big difference, which is most common in the world, is to be born sort of like in a city. And if you're born in a city, then your exposure to things that are not natural
Mhm.
is much greater. Like, you're exposed to advertisements, for example, just all over the place, and you're exposed to all kinds of people with all sorts of different values and energy. And so there's going to be benefits to this too. Like, if you're born in the city, I'm just focusing on one thing here, but there's benefits and drawbacks to everything.
Sure.
But so in this context, what generally happens is there's so much influence from the outside.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you could just walk down the street in the
Yeah.
city and someone tries to sell you something.
Yeah.
Like, when you're on a farm, that's not going to happen. You're going to just hear birds singing. So on a farm, you're going to be much more. I think what happens is you're much more connected to yourself. It's like the
Mhm.
support is there for that to happen. In the city, what's more likely is you're going to be pulled outside of yourself. And when we go to school, then it gets really bad because then we're influenced to stop thinking, usually,
Mhm.
and we're just fed a whole bunch of information. On a farm, I got to just think for myself. I got to just figure stuff out. In school, everything's been figured out already, and then you're just told
Mhm.
what the answers are to all these things, and you just got to like repeat it.
Right.
So number one, because I was born on a farm, I've always had this creative mind that's really problem solving oriented, where I think way outside the box.
Yeah,
And I
which
and I was
yeah.
not limited by superficial type things and stuff like that, like so then the second thing is, for whatever reason, I ended up having my first business ever started, which I started when I was young. I was only 19. I started a roofing business, a construction business. I became very successful with that. But what that did is eventually I would have uh, people call me up and say, "Hey, do you do repairs?" Like, well, yeah, of course, I'll do repairs. So your house is leaking? Yeah, I'll come over try to figure it out. So here's the problem solving. And what I realized is that I think my roofing business actually helped contribute to my like help develop a skill in me to track the root cause of things
Mhm.
psycho-emotionally.
Yeah.
Because in my roofing business it was more like physically, but if you have a roof in sorry, if you have a leak in your house,
Mhm.
the leak comes through the ceiling typically, right? So let's say it's coming through a light, or you can see a wet spot on the ceiling. So then you can conclude that the cause of the leak must be just right above there. But when you go up onto the roof, that's not where it is. There's no problem. So you have to, well, where the hell is this coming from?
Mhm.
So I had to start thinking, uh, exploring and discovering all these ways that a symptom can appear on the ceiling here, and that just got my mind
Mhm.
focused on that. And then I'd learn all kinds of things like, oh wow, the leak's way over here and this is why, and then the water track follows this path and this is why, and then it comes through here, so that
Mhm.
the problem's not here, the problem's way over there and this is why. And I did that for many years. Like, my roofing business was 15 years long, so that's another factor. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's been, so there's just sort of two main things. But I can get deeper too. I was also how I was raised. I was raised in unhealthy ways too,
Mhm.
to take responsibility for solving the problems of my parents.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that made me become a workaholic.
Mhm.
And that made me be essentially just addicted to work and solving problems.
Mhm.
And so I had to realize that, some of my own personal growth work, I had to realize that I have to transcend this part of my ego and not define my value and my self-worth on how many problems I can solve.
Mm. Right.
So,
Yeah.
and then just be free and go play.
Be free and
Um,
go play. Yeah, like you
Yeah.
were
So
mentioning.
I was born in a very poor home, and there's a lot of struggle and a lot of challenges.
Mhm.
So I had to become this problem solver and this contributor to fixing major challenges. And there was it caused me to develop certain strengths,
Mhm. Mhm.
but then it also caused me to develop certain traumas
Right.
and wounds in my ego complex. So there's three things that
Yeah.
I think have contributed to my passion for helping get to the root cause of cancer.
Mhm. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing more about you and your personal journey. That I those are things I didn't I think I did know. I mean, I knew you grew up in Canada, but I don't think I knew about the farm and all of that. And I didn't know about the roofing business. So I like
Oh,
learning
I
more about
love
you.
farm animals. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I love farm animals. My dream is to have my own land again one day, and this time it would be bigger. You know, once I can afford it, once I find the right place, I'd like to have a big piece of land and start a retreat again, actually, like a healing retreat, and
Oh, I got chills.
be self-sustainable.
I think that's great. I
That's
love
a good
that for
sign. I'm
you.
glad to
That
hear
is a great,
that.
it's a good sign. The goosebumps aren't usually wrong because, that's just
Right.
coming through. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna ask, like, what nourishes, because you're pouring a lot out into other people. You have been. So what nourishes your body, mind, soul?
Well, that definitely nourishes me for sure. You know, it's
Mhm.
very, very nourishing for me to help others
And teach.
and teach. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love teaching. I
Yeah.
really like teaching.
Yeah.
Um, but there's other things too that I love to do. I love to exercise. It
Yeah.
feels good to connect to my body
Hmm.
and and develop it and look after it, you know. I love to do river plunges.
Nice.
You go
Yeah.
into the river and
Oh
just let
yeah.
the river heal you.
Hmm.
Um, I really love mountain biking.
Uh-huh.
The challenge of it, the thrill, the feeling of freedom when you're flying, you're just floating through the air, and you can run into a lot of nature that way. Like you can oftentimes see deer, wild turkeys. Depends on where you are in the world, obviously. But I love mountain biking. And then I think one of my favorite things to do is to dance, actually, soul dance. And this is what I teach in my level 2 training, by the way, among a
Ah,
bunch of things.
nice.
Soul connection experiences are essential for healing as well. But some of the challenges that I've gone through in my life, which is also what has this is one of the biggest contributors to my wisdom
Hmm.
about things, is because I've gone through a lot myself and grown through those things.
Hmm.
That's what my whole level 1 training is about, is teaching how to grow through challenges so that we don't end up getting stuck and developing cancer. I've gone through some pretty significant challenges and grown through them, at least somewhat. I think in some cases I grew a lot, and other times maybe I just grew a little. I don't know. I'm still on the growth process, you know?
Right. It's a
Um,
journey. I hear you.
but I reached this point at one point in my life where I was so down, I was so depleted.
Mm.
Stress had taken such a toll on me. I was so stuck
Mm.
that I just had no way out. I felt like there was just no way out. I didn't have any money. I was kind of secluded and disconnected from people. And I discovered in that dark place dancing. I just somehow I one day I was playing a song for some reason, and it's like a Native American sort of, what's the song? It's a song by Oliver Shanti and Friends. If you ever look up that music,
I'm gonna, yeah,
it's
write that down. Oliver
some of my
Chauncey and Friends.
Oliver Shanti and Friends.
Uh-huh.
And it's music that, it's not English wording.
Mhm.
It's like, and it's rattles, drums. I love the
Mhm.
music. I just think it's
Mhm.
so beautiful.
Mhm.
And one of these songs came on, and it just caught me in a certain way, and I started to move. I was alone, and I felt like weird to just start dancing, like, but I started to enjoy it. And this just birthed, so long story short, I started dancing all the time by myself from my soul. No instruction, not like move your foot to the left and then move your foot to the,
Right.
no intellectual stuff, just my soul. And that today is one of my favorite things to do. It's one of my passions for sure. And I
Mhm.
teach how to dance from your soul. And now I'm actually learning, I've just begun learning how to DJ because I want to start creating music.
Oh.
I want to do this from the opposite end where because
Mhm,
I know how healing it is and how nourishing it is to a human being for us to dance. Like we're all by design.
mhm,
I feel like we're all meant to dance.
mhm.
like
I
like
agree.
we're all individuals. Like some people might be more called to art or
Sure,
whatever, but
but
what
to
we're our body is designed to move,
move
so
and mhm.
dance is super powerful stuff if you dance from the soul.
Yeah,
And if you learn certain dances too, I mean, of course, but
right.
yeah, so that's another thing that I'm doing.
I love that
So
you're
there's some
reminding me
quick
of that because I grew up as a dancer. And then I did a soul dance, like, class thing one time, and it was so awkward. I mean, everybody's just in there, but I love the drumming. I love Native American music anyway, so and even African and the drumming and the so I'm glad you're reminding me of how important that
that
is and how awkward it can
feels
feel.
good.
It feels great,
Yeah.
but it's yeah, I was like, I was trained to have movements and then you're just in there just moving how your soul wants. I was like, I have no idea
Yeah.
what I'm doing here. But yeah, let it go.
And and it's an example, it's really truly I think it's a spiritual practice because
Yeah.
when we're kids, before our ego is formed, we are truly free and non-judgmental. So a child can easily soul dance,
Yeah, you just tell
right?
them,
Then it
here's
just
some
depends
music,
on what
just go at
happens
it.
to,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and they're just soul dancing.
Mhm.
So depending on what happens in our childhood, then we can acquire judgments and fears and shame and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so you can be an adult and just freeze and be like not willing to risk moving your body in
Yeah.
some kind of a way that could attract judgment. You
Mhm.
can be alone and be uncomfortable. There's no one even around and you're uncomfortable because the
Yeah.
judgments just get embedded right inside of us.
Yep.
And that's not fun. So then what we're doing is we're missing out on the beauty of our body and all the many directions and movements that it is capable of. Like each one of our vertebrae can move in so many like just one
Mhm.
vertebrae sitting on top of another. It can move forward, it can move backwards, side to side. It
Yep.
can like rotate. It can do and everything in between, So
Hmm. Right. So
there's a
we're
lot of
designed
creativity
for
and
that. Yeah, we're
we're
designed for
designed to move.
creativity. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
designed for life. We're not designed for judgment.
I know. I
That's
know.
why judgment can really cause a lot of havoc on our body.
Yeah, yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
because
work to be done there for me personally still too. Yeah, good stuff, Paul. I'm excited for you to actually have land again. Because you've been moving
thank you.
around, right?
Yeah.
Where are you right now? Are you in Costa Rica these days or
Right now I'm in Costa Rica. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because I know you were in New Zealand at some point.
Yeah, I'm still traveling a lot. I'm not sure where I'll end up for sure. It's just kind of listening to my soul as I go. It's
I
like a
love it.
dance.
I love that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I want I want to find a large piece of land
Hmm.
and create something there from scratch
Hmm.
with applying all the things I've learned over these years so that it becomes a place that people with cancer can come to
Yeah.
heal themselves. And I think it will be very potent.
Oh, I know
So
it will be.
I'm just waiting on God to align it.
Right. Yeah. Because you know that will
May-
happen. In the
Mhm.
meantime,
Yeah,
just dance and enjoy yourself in Costa Rica.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I'm really enjoying the this time in my life. I'm not grounded, which was really new for me. My whole life, I just lived almost where I was born.
Hmm.
The majority of my life, I lived within an hour and a half from the place I was born.
Hmm.
And now I've just been so far from that place, totally uprooted, traveling, no place to call home.
Hmm.
And it's really caused me to grow in certain ways.
Hmm.
But I'm really loving the process. I've had to surrender my ego, learn how to trust,
Hmm.
and I'm really passionate about my training.
Yes.
So yeah,
Which is, yeah, is great. I'm so glad that you're doing that. So I know we've talked a lot about lots of things. Is there something that is on your heart to share that we haven't talked about? I want to make sure that we make a little room if there's anything else that you really wanted to share.
There was nothing really. I think something I'd like to kind of inspire and energize is
Sure.
the concept, and I think it's reality, is that we are actually in a spiritual world.
Hmm.
There is a process of evolution of our soul, and it's really valuable. And most of humanity is not aware of it and doesn't do it because it's not part of the school system. It's not part of religion.
Hmm.
Sometimes it can be part of religion, but
Hmm.
many of my clients, I have to teach them what the Bible is actually teaching. They don't understand. And
Hmm.
the very priests and ministers that are teaching the Bible don't understand some of the teachings of the Bible.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of like you can do yoga, but not be practicing spirituality.
Right, of
Like,
course.
just doing yoga doesn't mean you're on the spiritual path, really.
Right. Or think you're
There's
just going to yoga to stretch. Right.
so what I wanted to say is there's something here in this earth plane
Hmm.
that's beyond the physical,
Hmm.
and it's even beyond the emotional. There's something here that truly is spiritual, and it's so essential for humanity to rediscover this and to take it more seriously. Like if mainstream humanity was spiritual, wow, would this world be so different. And I'm not talking about like thinking positive or things like this. There's spirituality is very um it's about love, it's about the path of truth, and so I just want to energize that as a value. You know, it's something I feel like humanity really needs. And we all truly need this. We are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And
Yeah.
our emotions are neglected, first of all, in society in big
Right.
ways. But one of the most neglected aspect of ours is our spiritual self.
Hmm.
So I just want to encourage anyone to just want to kind of plant that seed and see if anyone would like to, if it helps anyone enter into that path a little bit more, because that's where all the most valuable things are. It's like that's where all the real fruits of life come from. Um, like we can be spiritual and wealthy, but if we're wealthy without spirituality, it's a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up. I know here at the end of our talk, but this is why I created the Nourish Soul podcast. These are the conversations that I wanted to be having about, what is the soul? What is spirituality? How do we align with the soul? Where are we off? And so the physical, the emotional, the mental, spiritual, all of it. And so I think this conversation has really touched on all of it and how it's all connected. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful to have you on. I'm also just happy to get to know you because I think the work you're doing is really obviously it's important, but you have a real unique way of an uniqueness of what you're sharing. And I think it's a fresh perspective that people, it's not so fresh to you because you've been doing it a long time, but it's fresh to a lot of people. And it's exactly what the world needs right now. So,
Mhm.
so thank you for the work. Thank you for coming on the show. Yeah, I'm really excited to see where you head.
Thank you so much. I really feel supported and appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's inspiring.
We'll just keep having you back too, because we could have gone in so many different directions that I was like, hmm. So,
Yeah, let's explore some other topics in the future.
yeah, for sure. Thank you, Paul.